Blog Talk Radio.
ENlightenment Evolution Network presents the Enlightenment Evolution Hour with your host, Rob Gauthier. Hey everybody, this is the Enlightenment Evolution Hour with your host, Rob Gauthier. The Enlightenment Evolution Hour is a part of the Enlightenment Evolution Network. All views and opinions suggested by host, guest, or callers of the show may not express the opinions of the Enlightenment Evolution Network. With that being said, I want to express and give my heart to all of you on this wonderful New Year's Eve. In just 4 hours here, 3 hours here, we are going to be celebrating the New Year on the East Coast. Broadcasting from Michigan, myself, Kalina, are here and ready for tonight. We also have a very, very special and wonderful guest. We have Granville Angell, who is a myriad of many things, a myriad of many ideas, concepts. Most commonly, he's known for the work that he did in counseling for many decades. Also, the former vice president of the North Carolina MUFON chapter. Also, the author of The God-Shaped Hole. Also, graduate of the Monroe Institute program. This man has done and seen everything. He's had tons of UFO experiences, and some of you might even know him as Kalina's father. He's a wonderful guy, a wonderful, great guy. He is going to be coming in just a couple of minutes. We're going to talk to him about his experience, how connections with the extraterrestrial presences on this earth have helped change the tide of energy and what it means and implies to connect to the earth consciousness and all of the bigger picture things on that subject and many more. We're also going to be taking callers this evening. So if you want to talk to Granville, you can call in at area code 347-308-8788. Come in and call, send anything that you'd like to say, talk about anything that you would like to talk about, and ask any good questions to Granville about what we cover in the very first half of the show. Before we get to Granville, though, there's a couple announcements. On the 3rd, 3 days from now, the Density Masterclass Advanced 2.0. It is an online event. It is all things universal construct, all things density dimensions, all things consciousness evolution, all things the evolution of the soul, incarnation cycles, you name it, it will be there. Ardif is going to be sharing, as well as possibly Treb, some wonderful, deep, profound information about those things, and then taking your questions, as well as a 2-hour presentation from myself explaining all of the things that I've learned since the last Density Masterclass from Treb and Ardif's work. It is going to be very profound information. If you were lucky enough to have joined us on the first, the second one will be twice as good with the information that comes in. So, remind yourselves, if that's something you're interested in, you can go to trebchanneling.com, go to the events tab, go to online events. It's on the very top of the page. You can register there. You can see all the finer details of what time, how you get on, where you register, all those great things. So, that and a myriad of other things that we'll get to when we get to the announcements. But for this moment, I would like to invite Granville Angell, our special guest, in today, and bring him in. And remember, if you'd like to talk to him, that's area code 347-308-8788. And we are going to welcome in Granville right now. How are you doing, Granville?
Hey, Rob. How are you?
I'm doing great. And how are you doing tonight? Are you ready for the New Year's?
Oh, I am. This is the greatest way to ring in a new year that I can think of. Meditating.
And this is the great experience that we're going to be able to share what I perceived as one of the most interesting and profound stories of a person who I've met with their own personal life story, and I think that this is very important to share. One thing I didn't elaborate on to the listeners is that within the next month you will be starting your own show here on the Enlightenment Evolution Network, and we'll get into that a little later, and we'll talk about those. But for people who might not be aware of your work or what you've done, can you talk to them about what drew you into the idea of counseling and maybe the progression of your counseling throughout the years and how it related to A, your extraterrestrial connections, and B, the evolution of people's consciousness?
Wow, that's a big question.
It is.
I guess ever since I was a kid, I was interested in science. I had a sense of connection from as early as I can remember with out there, let's say, and it just seemed like there was this whole void in human experience with regard to who we are on higher levels beyond just the physical. And so I was very much attracted to psychology. In high school, I was in the science fairs and all that, and it was a biological thing, but it always broke down to, behavior and psychology and orientation. And so, when I served in Vietnam as a helicopter ambulance pilot, and I saw a lot of suffering over there and a lot of tragedy, and war really brings, when you experience war, it really brings home the insensibility of war, the uselessness of war as a solution for human conflict. And so when I came back, my whole interest was focused on, trying to my main interest was just helping the world, people, realize their deeper spiritual nature. And while I was interested in research, the flow of things went in such a way that I wound up going into counseling and doing an awful lot of counseling. At this point, I'm retired from counseling and getting ready to do more of a spiritual focus with my remaining years, that and writing.
Well, you brought up the point that you had served as a helicopter pilot and for the medical team during the Vietnam War. First of all, how old were you when you went into that war zone?
Well, I was 19 in aviation school. I was 20 in Vietnam. That's a very young age to be doing that kind of thing. Actually, it's kind of a challenge for anybody of any age, but it was a very formative period for me, so it shaped a lot of the rest of my life.
And that's kind of why I ask. I look back and think what my mind was like at 19, what it was like at 20, and I remember having hardships just doing regular things, doing the regular day job, getting out of school and doing all these things, and that was tough enough on itself, but to go into a place where there are people dying, and working as a medical person, I'm sure that you had seen many experiences that probably you didn't care to see at that time, nor till this day, of friends dying, people dying that you knew, little children, things like that. I know a couple stories that you've shared with me have been very deeply touching to my heart, of the kind of pain that brought. Now, when you go through that pain, that also brought up another thing with you. It brought up kind of an energy that stuck with you. Can you talk a little bit about how that affected you, seeing this conflict and seeing this war after you got out?
Yeah, the child casualties especially were really difficult. And, I had this kind of an inner life. I would escape into music at night in the wee hours in between missions, in between being on duty for flying. And I was also involved in some type of meditation. It was very formative compared to, what I learned since. But I was increasingly aware that there was this other level. At the time, I didn't feel like I could get into it. I didn't even know for sure that the world was going to go in the direction of being open to the whole idea of UFOs, of a populated universe, of us not being alone, of us being more than our bodies. Indeed, that our bodies are really vehicles. And I was shot down a couple times. I had some experiences with that, especially the second time, where it just, without going into a whole lot of detail, because I don't want to make this a war-focused program, but it's, by the laws of physics, I don't even know how we survived it. We basically fell in a ball of fire, and I had already had the sense that if something happened, I didn't know who was contacting me. I felt like it had something to do with the UFOs, though, who was in them, and I had the sense that even if something terrible happened, they would get me on the ground. And now I look back and think it was probably some kind of internal dialogue that I used to think maybe had no basis in reality. But the more I've read and studied, the more I feel like, that it was a genuine conversation on some inner level, because I remember being given the information, your feet will be on the ground. You will get on the ground somehow. And even when we were falling on fire, I wondered, well, how is this going to happen? Because I can't breathe, everything's burning. But we made it down before the aircraft burned up, and I crawled out. Thanks to my Nomex flight suit, I just got a little scorched knee, and that was it. So I guess early in life, my earliest sense of things, early memories, I remember being around 5 years old and hollering at my mother and my grandmother to come out and look at the flying saucers. I don't remember what I was looking at, but I just remember being very excited. And I don't know that I consciously put the two together, but some months later we had transferred to the Philippines, and my father was stationed there in the Air Force, and I was outside at dusk playing in a culvert and looked up and saw the pink sky. It was about dusk, and suddenly felt this overwhelming wave of homesickness come over me, and the sense that, well, this isn't my home. I'm from out there, someplace that has a sky like this. And, I somehow kind of intuitively knew that wasn't something you talk about to the older folks. They probably weren't ready to handle that kind of thing.
Well, sure. And
right.
You've spoken about how you received this feeling and messages, and I'm sorry to have cut you off. I'll let you finish that.
No.
I just wanted to ask, that intuitiveness that you felt when you were in your crash and when you were sitting there looking at the sky, how does this intuition feel? Does it come in as words, feelings, ideas, pictures?
Well, in that it comes in as all of those things at different times, the intuitive awareness. But that particular occasion, when I was 5, it was flashes of memory and just knowing, just knowing. And I was always, and then I remember as a kid talking about this, Halloween always had to be some kind of alien, and playing with things like pens and turning them into starships. And of course, in those days, they had Buck Rogers and rocket ships and a lot of fire coming out of the bottom, and my rocket ships used some kind of special energy that would make them float through the sky, and they didn't need to have fire coming out the back. And I could go on and on. There's just a lot of things that, the scientist in me looks back and goes, wow, I mean, how did I know all this stuff? And, without actually having experienced it. And so, I trusted in myself. I reached the point where I don't expect others to necessarily accept. In fact, I would prefer they don't accept what I say unless they have some grounding in their own experience, their own study, or some awareness, because I think we should use discernment and healthy skepticism before we make decisions about, what we think is our reality.
Yes, and I know that's something that you've supported throughout your life is working through discernment on your own experiences and feeling it, thinking about it, and then using what you have as a tool to further discern. Now, you've had this experience when you were 5, you had this understanding. You also felt guidance throughout the time when you were younger, throughout the war, and after you get out of the war, this war teaches you a different perception, a different side. What was your biggest thing that you felt while you were coming out of that, and you thought about what you would like to do with your career?
Well, I think the war, first of all, did a lot of physiological damage. We now recognize that as PTSD. A bad case of war nerves would be the slang term of that. And I realized that the world could be a very, very hostile place, having experienced the extreme end of that. And I felt like all of it went back to the fact that we don't have a grounding, as a rule, in our culture. We have religions and so forth, but there's no real grounding in depth spirituality, experiential-based spirituality. And I'm not saying none of us have that. I'm not saying that we haven't increased that over the years. It's clearly happened over the years, over the last generation or two. But, I think if I could speak from the perspective of the aliens, I think they would have a very different perspective, the people that are watching us down here, being humans in our little human game on this little planet in this huge galaxy. I think that they would say, well, generally, at least in the Western world and in a lot of the world, the religion isn't the named religions, but it's probably some kind of commercialism, some kind of commercial-based, driven, materialistic view of reality with, kind of dogmatic aspects, of each one being a different religion, but the main focus being very materialistic, very consumer-oriented, very into power and control and materiality. And it's sad because it just seems like, it's very slow going, helping all of us understand that there are so much deeper realities. And we're standing on the shore of a huge ocean of consciousness, and we're not even hardly off the beach, in terms of swimming in that ocean. And that makes me sad. And I had hoped we'd be a lot further along by this time in my life about a lot of things, but, particularly this. But we're working on it, and I think that's the thing. Tonight is just another little bit of drop in that ocean to help people feel safer about realizing who we really are, who each of us really is. And I think that's kind of the most important work that certainly I can be doing at this point in my life.
Well, absolutely. And what helped you form this is, first of all, your experiences throughout your childhood with your intuition, the time that you had spent at war after you get out, your interest leaned towards helping others by kind of letting people know how your experiences were. And now that you're out and you're going towards the counseling idea for school, can you give us a little credentials, first of all, on your counseling and how extensive your schooling was, and the things that you kind of learned, so it sets the tone for people to understand what you did professionally to help people?
Sure. I completed my undergraduate degree in psychology at the University of Florida, and then went on to the graduate school there and studied counseling and got master's and specialist degrees in that. And the focus was on community agency or mental health counseling. and that was pretty much what I did for the first 12 years or so of my career. I worked in settings as diverse as starting off in the correctional system and then going on into the mental health. I worked in a state hospital. Then I worked in the mental health center, setting, and then finally started my private practice, which I did, I guess, about the last 20 years or so of my career, 20-some years. And increasingly, it seemed like, even though I did a lot of relationship counseling and that sort of thing, it seemed like spiritual issues came up very often. And that was always my interest. I studied hypnosis. I did work with abductees, and I learned that there was a whole continuum. I was having experiences that I did not experience as abductions, but yet there was kind of an overlap, and there were people. I found that less people felt traumatized when the approach was not a victim approach, and yet so many researchers and people involved in doing, abduction, hypnosis and helping UFO encounter experiencers like to take a victim, you're a victim approach, and I think that's really up to the client to decide whether they feel like a victim or not. Left to their own interpretations and of their own experiences, I found that more people experience themselves as going through some kind of encounter and an awful lot of fascination, and not so much an abduction. And
well, sure.
Yeah.
You said you did hypnosis, so that includes regression, correct?
Sure.
Yeah, and in that regression, that's where you kind of connected to people who had took on maybe repressed memories or submersed memories that you brought back up to them. They knew that they had an experience with a contact, but they weren't sure of the specifics. Is that why they came to you originally, or was it usually for something else?
Sometimes I've had a couple of occasions where people came and they had no idea that I did this work, because I kind of kept it on the down low. We're talking about going back into the 80s, okay? And I mean, it's not, I belong to a profession that's working on getting licensure and, board certification and, increasing credentials and standing in the world. And here was this one counselor. Of course, I wasn't the only one. There were quite a few of us, enough of us anyway, that were doing this kind of work, because we were comparing notes and we were finding consistencies across the board. And we, many of us, a number of us took part in, communication, you like MUFON, meetings and UFO conferences and things like that. We even had some private clinical type training and things and conferences. So we found fairly early on that there were consistencies that, if everybody's making this stuff up, how come everybody knows to make up the same stories, And especially in the early years, there were an awful lot of people that were just, all they wanted was answers. The thing that I think was quite common in all this was what Linda Seebach in her writing calls shattered reality. And there's a difference between shattered reality and feeling truly victimized as an abductee. Now, there are people who experience real victimization, the things that are done medically to them against their will, the sense of they can come any time and get me whenever they want, and some of those other aspects for some people are truly traumatic. And then there are the other levels where people feel like there's an exchange, they're involved in some kind of medical program and their samples taken and things done, but they also have interactions and learn things and they're taught things, and so there, over the years my impression has been that there's a whole continuum and that there are different races that are involved in some of these projects, and you have some people that are cold and clinical, some of these beings, and some of them that are truly trying to have an interactive experience and relate and teach, as well as do whatever they're doing to try to save their race or create a new race or whatever their agenda is.
Yeah, and something that you said was interesting. You had said that this was going on in the 80s, that a lot of people were having similar experiences. As I'm thinking the words, yeah, that was before the internet. Kalina also said, hey, that was before the internet. So it wasn't like people could just get on a computer and find things of other people to duplicate or replicate it. So that's one interesting point. Now, you're talking about your experience and MUFON. You're also talking about experience of other people's either quote-unquote abductions or contact. A lot of people prefer the term contactee, which is one that I like a little better than abduction. When you're looking at all of those things, and then you're looking at your role that you played, your intuition, can you also kind of, so people can come full circle, let them understand maybe some of the personal experiences that you've had in your contactee, either the visits or connections or communications?
Sure. Well, one of the things, I'm going to kind of start by sharing what conclusions I've come to, and then kind of support that with some of my experiences. I've come to the conclusion that most experiencers or abductees, or whatever term you want to use, are not aware of it consciously. And because of the program, because of human nature being what it is, and I won't get into a whole discussion about state-dependent learning and shifts in consciousness at this point. If you want to later, that's fine. But you could probably explain this better than I could, Rob. I don't know. But, people do go through, these stages in their brain, in their consciousness. And so some retain memory and some don't. And it seems like some of the ETs enhance, using their technology, the blockage, or they put in screen memories, some of these other things people read about where, you might think you had a dream about owls, but in fact, under hypnosis, you remember being picked up. The owls were in fact 6 feet high or 3 feet high, and, they flew in a little Volkswagen. Wait a minute, it's not a Volkswagen, it was something, And so they have this whole thing that comes out if you start working with them. Some people are able to have it so deep that or repressed that you could work with them, and I'm very strong on not implanting memories in my techniques. So I've worked with people that I really felt in my heart were total experiencers or abductees or whatever you want to call them, but they weren't coming up with it consciously, even in trance and under hypnosis. And I wasn't going, in time it might work free, but it wasn't going to happen. So there's that whole continuum. In myself, comparing my experiences, I look at somebody like Betty Andreas and Luca, Whitley Strieber, even some of the others that Bud Hopkins has done research with, and I feel like everything else, that kind of fall somewhere in the middle of the continuum where the vast amount of my experience is not remembered. I have flashes and things. But just to share a few things, I was aware that somebody was interacting in my life when first of all, I was obsessed with, later on, as I got older, when I watched Close Encounters of the Third Kind, the movie, I alternated between laughing and crying through the whole thing. I mean, it was just super intense for me because I could totally relate to this Richard Dreyfuss's obsessions and building this mountain, and his wife's reaction, and all this craziness that was in the movie, where I felt driven, and I felt like there are others that feel this way, and this is real. And this movie is a Hollywoodized way of sharing that. But when I was, I guess, around between 12 and 15, I started having out-of-body experiences. There were two entities there. I sensed that there were at least two entities there. I had, certain things happening with that, like the roaring and the electric feeling in the body and some of the other things that I'd never heard of. And the religious path I was following at the time certainly didn't allow or include those kind of phenomena. In fact, I don't think that anything out there in the literature had any explanations for what was going on. And I did get a hold of a book by somebody named Fox on out-of-body experiences and got some answers that explained, at least the out-of-body part. But I always wondered who were those dudes that were back there behind me out of sight doing this, and I felt like there was more, but I just couldn't remember. Then when I was I guess it was actually before that, because I was 10, we used to sleep out. We were in Florida, and we used to in the Atlantic, Florida, and my brother and I slept out on a screen porch. And there was a regular roof over it, but we had where my bed sat was a solid screen along the wall, because it was warm climate, and it looked out across the backyard and the whole field of palmettos in the wooded palmettos. And I woke up one morning about 1 or 2 in the morning, and there was a light coming up over the house, and my skin stood up, my hair stood up on my skin, and I looked at this thing, and I realized it was a flying saucer coming down, and I was all excited, and I didn't say anything at first, and it came right down and floated down into the palmetto field behind the backyard, and my sense was I was supposed to get up and go out there to it. The unfortunate thing was that my dog recently had been bitten by a rattlesnake and died. And, and I had become very afraid of going out through those woods. And I remember sitting there, and my brother woke up, and he said he could see another craft floating in the sky over the house. And we talked about it, and I remember seeing the thing kind of floating over the palmettos like a boat on the water. You just kind of floating up and down. And, you don't know all these things until you read them later. It's just totally experientially based for me. And then the thing just kind of floated up and drifted off. And I don't remember the rest of the night, although many years later under hypnosis, I had a flash of memories of the little guys coming and seeing them through the screen. I had a flash of a tear in the screen. Don't ask me why there was a tear in the screen and they took me out when we're talking about beings with technology that take us through solid walls and windows. Why was there a tear in the screen? I don't know. But that was my experience. And the thing that was pretty neat about it was, well, first of all, I'll say that they disguised themselves as little cartoon chipmunks like Alvin and the Chipmunks.
Oh, wow.
And I was already involved in UFO research myself, but it was fairly early on in terms of the actual, like I was not really on the inside at that point. I was just about to wind up on the inside professionally, and I met Bud Hopkins at a workshop, and I told him about the cartoon chipmunk screen memories. And he says, that's interesting, because actually we haven't published it yet, but there are a number of children we've encountered where abductees are experiencing screen memories as cartoons. The screen memories are cartoons. Adults might remember an owl or a deer, in the road that was looking at them or some kind of thing. But, there were a number of children that were remembering the encounter was screened over with the chipmunks, even with a little voice, So
that it makes sense too, because a child would be very frightened to see a being who looks different than a human walking,
right.
Being intellectually capable, knowing that the being is smart. kind of humans have that perception of the only smart thing that walks this planet is us, and we might look a little different, but we're all the same. You know, that makes sense.
Exactly. And in trance, what I remembered was the kind of holographic. So I felt like I was seeing the little cartoon chipmunks for a second. They were sort of like an image floating, almost like bad CGI, and the eyes and the beings and the faces behind it, and it was just a flash under hypnosis that I got. And what I got out of this, I got very emotional, was the feeling of, well, it was one thing that came kind of consistently, was it was more than one group, and that the encounters are very important to me. And that particular night, maybe, when they left, I was feeling abandoned. And it was like, to use a more modern analogy, it was like being left at the mall, you know, when you think your parents are going to pick you up, you know. It was like feeling just left behind and panicked. And so that didn't fit at all with what I was reading and studying about, you know, the whole UFO phenomenon, and you know, especially hanging out with people like Bud Hopkins and Whitley Strieber and John Mack and some of those folks that were, you know, David Jacobs. And John Mack was more, you know, he has a clinical background. He was a psychiatrist. And he saw that as more of a fascinating thing like I did. He didn't see it as necessarily a negative thing. He took, you know, I think a more objective view in some ways of this phenomenon. So there's something else I was going to add to this, but it'll probably come out a little later. But those are a couple of the experiences that I had that I didn't remember until, you know, here I was, you know, studying about it and then having experiences myself, and then I became aware that I was having encounters in real time at that, you know, over that period of my life as well. They became more conscious, and you know, and my mind would always say, well, I try to say, well, maybe I'm dreaming it. But then I would have an experience, and then I'd read something, and the reading would reinforce, because it was enough like my experience that it would, you know, it fit that. And I'm wondering now, I had a family, and my daughters are involved in this, and I don't know how much I could feel safe to share with my daughters.
I was just going to ask you a little bit, because I know Kalina doesn't mind you sharing at least the experiences you had with her. If that's something you'd like to talk about, we'd love to hear. I was just going to ask that as you got older, you had 2 children, both daughters. One of them was Kalina.
Right.
And then as that happens, Kalina has told me stories about what experiences that you guys have had together, not so much on a personal contact level, one-on-one, but the ones that you've been able to see that were in the sky, specifically the one that was following you in the car. I don't know if you want to elaborate on that or not, but if you do, we'd love to hear it.
Yeah, let me share a couple things with them, since they were group encounters in a sense, or at least implicit in the first example. I'm just going to say one of my daughters. That way, it'll feel a little bit like less like, you know. And then if somebody wants to step up and own it, fine, or not fine, but. There was an encounter where I was sitting, and this is very early on, and I'm reading Whitley Strieber, and he had a son, and his son, he was describing, it was totally synchronistic, because he was describing his son's reaction to the little doctors, the little blue doctors, I think he called them. And I noticed, you know, my daughter kind of squinching, what's the word I'm looking for? Squeamish, you know, around my chair looking at the cover of my book. And I held the book cover up to her face and said, so does this bother you? And she says, she was very young at the time, and she says, I'm just not comfortable with those doctor ones. And I said, what makes you think they're doctors? And she said, well, I don't know. They scare me, and that's all I remember of the conversation, except I certainly remember the chills going up my back that she identified this face on the cover of the Stewart's book, which is not even a very accurate face as far as my experience is concerned, with doctors, And then there was another encounter where I had one of the daughters was 9, and her shirt was. I had an encounter, and it was before dawn on a Saturday morning, and she came upstairs saying that was when women had the little padding in their shoulders, and her shirt was turned inside out, and the padding was bouncing up and down on the shoulders like epaulets. And she comes in and says, I don't know what happened. She said, I went to sleep, and these were right side in, and now they're inside out. So, that kind of reinforced, what had been going on with me. It seemed to happen, and then both of them encountered things. They were, again, I don't want to go into details on specifically identifying any particular daughter, but we tried to keep it on an enchanting level. I did feel at times like, I guess, I had a rather vociferous encounter with David Jacobs one evening at a UFO conference, and he and I kind of got at it because he really sees us as being invaded. I don't see it quite like that. I do see some of the lower developed groups as being somewhat invasive in terms of meeting their agenda, and then I think some others are interested in an interactive, kind of a quid pro quo kind of relationship where they give us something and we give them something, and our something in many cases is kind of a genetic, resources to either develop a race that's better, more efficient. Apparently they've lost some aspects of their very ancient race, apparently. Rob, I'm sure Treb or Diff can address this in much greater detail than I can. I'm still working on the mystery.
Sure. There's been some things they shared, sure.
Yeah, and then the other one where I encountered with both daughters, we had gone to a MUFON conference, and again, it was a very interesting example of synchronicity. It was actually a MUFON meeting, state meeting, and Stephen Greer was visiting. I knew Stephen Greer real well back in the early 90s especially. I was very impressed with his intelligence and resourcefulness, and I am not surprised he's accomplished what he has, because he's a very brilliant, kind, and courageous man, and I wish him the best. And on this particular day, he came to of course, we're in North Carolina. He was in North Carolina at the time, living. And he came to the meeting, and we talked, we had a good meeting, and as we always did, after MUFON meetings back in those days, most of us went out to a local restaurant and had dinner together and socialized. And my daughters had come with me that time. And we were leaving. It was Salisbury, and we were driving through town, on the outskirts of town, and Kalina had been lamenting that she had never seen a UFO. It was like they always kind of got the drop and they were in the house or something, but she never actually saw a craft, and what's that all about? And so I was kind of in a joking mood when I thought, we live a ways out of Charlotte, but when we were in around Charlotte, you see the airliners coming down, and I thought this was, at first I thought it was an airliner landing, and as a joke, I started to say, well, there's your UFO, Kalina, and she was sitting in the back seat, and it was crossing right across the front of the car above the highway. And before I got the sentence out, it became, there's UFO as a joke, to there's your UFO, oh my God, it is a UFO. It floated right across the road, and it was three lights. It was a triangle, and it drifted out like over the city to our right. It made a turn on its central axis, which aircraft don't do, and swooped right back over us. And as it was coming over us, Kalina said, I can feel their presence, that they're aware of us. And the aircraft made a 90-degree right turn, and it was right above the door, but up in the sky, 300 or 400 feet. And so it was right over us and following our path down the highway. And we're all excited, and my younger daughter she was saying, oh my God, they're going to get us, and it was a difference in the way they both experienced it, sort of, and I think a lot of it had to do with age. And we're going along, and we whipped into this huge parking lot on the left to what it then was a church called Foursquare Gospel Church. It was completely empty, huge parking lot. And that's when she said, the younger ones, Ariel said, they're going to get us. And I jump out, and I'm chasing this thing as it's coasting, silent. I could see the outline of the craft drifting right over the top of the asphalt, parking lot, out toward the woods in the other direction. And I'm running, all excited, and then suddenly I had this flash again of, I don't know why, Richard Dreyfuss and this crazy thing when he was running down the street and the craft was floating, and here I am doing this thing in real life. Of course, it's a different-looking craft. And so I turn back, and I'm watching the thing go down out over the trees and coast around in the distance. And I started watching the clock because we had to drive out through quite a bit of country to get back home. And you watch the clock because you want to, in case you might have missing time. And I saw the craft one more time way off in the distance, and it shot a beam down that got halfway to the ground and stopped, like a laser beam. It was like, if you send this beam down, it would stop in midair. And I remember thinking, I mustn't be seeing the craft. Lights can't do that. They can't do that. Light doesn't stop before it hits the ground. It stops when it hits, and then, again, like everything else, years later I came across this thing where other people had seen these crafts send off light, and it would stop in midair. The beam would stop in midair somewhere and not touch it wouldn't reach the object it was going toward. And that's an enigma to me, how they're able to accomplish that. But so I've re-entered that in my pantheon of memories as acceptable memories because, other people have reported the same kind of experience.
Sure. And that oh, go ahead if you have more to that.
No,
please.
Go ahead. I'm fine. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. The experiences that you have, all of these things, your time in counseling, regressing other people. We're going to be coming up on the hour mid-break, and then on the other side we'll talk about some of your spiritual aspects of what you've learned in your time at the Monroe Institute. But what does this give you as a conclusion? And you have time to talk about it. We've got at least 10 minutes before the break. What is your conclusion about all of these experiences, what these entities are here to do, what your feeling is that humans' part in their interaction plays with it, or just your basis summary of what do you feel this ET presence is?
Well, I think probably, it's not probably, my mind's going several directions at once, trying to think what's the best way to say this. The easiest way is to just simply share that, one more person to share. It's the program Ancient Aliens is on. They keep repeating all these episodes. It's wonderful. I think there's far, far, far more truth than there is just, vague conjecture. And I think what we're learning as humanity is that we live in a populated universe. I think there are three things that need to happen in sequence, or at least probably somewhat together, before we finally enter this, this whole new era that we're moving into. And we're in the process of this now. The first thing is we're realizing that we're not alone in the universe. That we share. This is a multi-populated universe. There are many other races here. There are many others that have higher sentience than we do. That we're all evolving to the higher level, to the spiritual, highest spiritual attainment, and that basically we're not alone. And not only are we not alone, but boy, are we not alone. and then and that is kind of a segue to the next thing that we need to realize is that is the Monroe Institute will share, and the research is sharing. I mean, the science is overwhelming at this point. We are more than our physical body. That indeed our physical body is a vehicle that allows us to exist in this reality, and that there's certain things that, which we could get into later, that have caused us to have our consciousness limited, and I think that era is going to be over. And then the third thing is that as we learn that our physical body is just a vehicle, and we're so much more than that, we also realize that, as the religions share in various ways, we're a spark of God, or God is within us, or the Atman, or whatever term. We are literally an aspect of the overall being, the divine consciousness, that the universe is enfolded into us like this entire hologram, that we contain the entire universe within our being, and that when we wake up and realize who we are, the potential, that we're literally all many gods, aspect of the overall God head, or the creative presence, supreme force of the universe, there's going to be no stopping humanity in terms of, what we can do as far as what's really important, what matters. And we're not talking about power and control and over others, or any of the old games, the Moloch games and the master games we try to play. We're talking about moving forward in the universe with all the other folks out there to higher levels of consciousness and having the great adventure, great adventure. And it's a very, very exciting time for us to be alive and experiencing, being a part of humanity going through this great awakening.
I think that you said those things very well. I think that a lot of people in the community, the listeners to this network, are all finding truthful aspects of all of that within themselves, and that's why it's so exciting to be able to come onto a show like this, for you to share your story, for you to have your own show to share, and for each person who has experiences that tell them, whether they're to them trivial or not, any way that you're able to share that, whether you make a video on YouTube and 20 people see it, or whether you start your own radio show and thousands of people listen, it's important for everyone to share their experience, because the more that we share, the more that people who are on the fence about whether they want to believe but they can't believe, they're not alone. And through that feeling of not being alone, it makes everything much easier. All right, well, Gran, I think that's a good place to call the mid-show break. What I'll do is I'll go ahead and mute your mic, and here in about 10 minutes we'll get back and we'll go ahead and start from scratch. I'll do a few announcements, and then I'll unmute you in about 10 minutes, okay?
That sounds good, Rob.
Thank you so much, Gran. We'll be back in about 10 minutes. Thank you.
Sounds good. Copy that. Okay.
All right. Thank you. All right, everybody. Granville Angell, if you just tuned in or have just tuned in mid-conversation, Granville Angell is with us. He's the author of The God-Shaped Hole. We will be taking questions on the show, so if you'd like to take if you'd like to ask Granville a question, you can call area code 347-308-8788. Granville Angell is a retired counselor who had counseled, done hypnosis, regression for many decades. He's also enjoyed the benefit of being a high member in the North Carolina chapter MUFON. He's also worked with some of the great names in ufology today. As you heard, he's worked with Dr. Stephen Greer, with Strieber Whitley, all of these really great people. He's also done some work at the Monroe Institute. We're going to talk about that on the other side of the break. If you would like to call in and ask questions, you can at area code 347-308-8788. We're going to play network announcements in a minute, but before we do that, what I would like to tell all of you is that on the 3rd of January, in 3 days, we will be doing Advanced Density Masterclass. That's everything density dimensions, everything universal consciousness, the evolution of consciousness, incarnation cycles, and all things universe. Very advanced, detailed information. You can go to trebchanneling.com. You can look that up. We also have an event in Asheville on April 3rd, 4th, and 5th. It will be an amazing thing. With everybody who's there, we'll have 3 days to do CE5, which is something that Dr. Stephen Greer gave a name to. People have been doing this for a while, but he's found a way to hone that. We're going to be doing lots of different things. What also we're going to be doing for Treb Channeling, we are going to look at next September. We have all 8 channelers for the channel panel. This is a 2-day live event and streaming event. We have myself, we have Monday night's host, Daniel Scranton, we have Brad Johnson, Sean Swanson, Nora Harold, Wendy Kennedy, Lee Harris, and also with our brand newest channeler, Sean Randall. That is the lady who channeled Torah in Tuning In, documentary Tuning In, Spirit Channels of America. She is our newest 8th member to add to that group. Go to trebchanneling.com, go to the events tab, go to live events, go to online events, or go to workshops, and you can find all the information about all of the events that Treb Channeling is doing. There will be many more added this year, so keep your eyes on that. And now we will go to the Enlightenment Evolution Network announcements for this week. Thank you guys for listening. We'll be back in 7 minutes.
Hi, this is Karen Newman from the show About Oneness, and here's what's coming up on the Enlightenment Evolution Network 1 and 2, starting on Monday, December the 29th, until Sunday, January the 4th. Simply put, Rob Gauthier, founder of the EEN and the host of the show that started it all, the Enlightenment Evolution Hour, has put together the greatest metaphysical radio network ever. 7 days a week, we have shows that will aid you on your path to enlightenment, evolution, and ascension. On EEN1, on Monday, 7:30 p.m. Pacific, 10:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Heart to Heart Talk Radio with your host, Daniel Scranton. Join Daniel and his featured guests discussing a wide variety of metaphysical topics. Daniel channels the creators, the Hathors, Ophelia the Fairy, Archangel Michael, and the latest, the Unicorn Collective. Daniel and his guests will take phone calls and questions, and it's sure to generate high-frequency discussions. You can find more about Daniel on his website, danielscranton.com, and also on Facebook. Go to the Events tab on Daniel's website to learn more about Daniel's upcoming events. Daniel's guest on Monday will be Rob Gauthier. On Tuesdays at noon Pacific Standard Time, 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, please join hosts Megan Crandallmeyer and Rachel Archelaus for Radio Inspiration, Expression, and Abundance for their show, Soulfulpreneur. Spiritual business specialists Rachel and Megan will bring you inspiring conversations with people who are living their soul purpose. Frequent guests include psychic mediums, channelers, coaches, artists, and authors. Wednesday nights, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 6 p.m. Pacific, is the show that started it all, the Enlightenment Evolution Hour with host Rob Gauthier. Rob channels Treb on the first Wednesday of each month and will take callers' questions. On the third Wednesday, he will have special guests such as guest channelers and other metaphysical teachers. The other 2 Wednesdays are freestyle call-in shows to discuss whatever callers have on their minds. Tune into Rob on Wednesday nights, and you can also find him at trebchanneling.com or on Facebook on the Enlightenment Evolution Network group page. Rob has a few special announcements. Every Sunday at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 6 p.m. Pacific, TrebChanneling.com hosts an hour-long meditation class. Please go to TrebChanneling.com to register. Coming up on January 3rd is the online interactive Density Masterclass. The cost is just $25 for this 4-hour study of densities, dimensions, universal constructs, and much, much more. Then from April 3rd to April the 5th, 2015, you can spend 3 days with Treb and Ardif in Asheville, North Carolina, learning to channel during the lunar eclipse. This is a 3-day workshop on channeling, only 30 spots available. And on September 19th, Treb Channeling proudly presents the Channel Panel, Awakening from Within. Channelers include Lee Harris, Sean Swanson, Daniel Scranton, Nora Harold, Wendy Kennedy, Brad Johnson, Rob Gauthier. This special live event is available in person and also on live stream. The cost of admission is $120 per day or $200 for both days. And on live stream, $50 per day or $100 for both days. Go to TrebChanneling.com to purchase a ticket. On Thursday night, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 6 p.m. Pacific, join host Philip Malika for the Consciousness Evolution Hour. Join Philip and his special guest and co-host as they discuss the shift, ascension, timelines, metaphysical concepts, and the fifth dimension. Find Philip on the Consciousness Evolution 2.0 group page on Facebook and also on YouTube. On Fridays, The Earth Experience with Kalina Angell, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 6 p.m. Pacific. The Earth Experience explores our soul's expansion through our human experiences on Earth. Kalina will help you navigate and expand through these exciting times and the confusions that we are manifesting as 5D beings. Saturdays at 10 a.m. Pacific Time, 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Victoria Vives hosting Earth Sky People Radio, living in harmony with Mother Earth and awakening to an intergalactic society, bringing you to greater awareness regarding starseeds and extraterrestrial life, living in harmony with one another, with Mother Earth and with life beyond Earth, the transformative power of music, frequency, and sound, shamanism, ancestral wisdom, and the star nations, intentional communities, self-sustainable and regenerative living, the interstellar alliance, or planet Earth becoming a part of an intergalactic society, and much, much more. On January the 3rd, join Victoria for a Q&A with Sasha Stone regarding any details on joining the New Earth Nation, forming intentional communities, and becoming sovereign. You can learn more about Victoria and her upcoming events on victoriavives.com/radio. On Sundays, 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 11 a.m. Pacific, is my show, About Oneness. About Oneness is a weekly radio program focused on celebrating the ongoing conscious awakening of our planet and our realization of oneness. I am an integrated channel, medium, Reiki master, and metaphysical teacher. I have a varied and diverse background, including that of being a singer, dancer, writer, as well as working in the sport, nutrition, and fitness world. As a channel, I bring forward the information of my non-physical guides called Theos, whose message is always that of oneness and unconditional love. This show for me is about integrating all of my experiences and following my highest excitement, which is tapping into the truth of the universe. If you would like to learn more about me, my upcoming guests, as well as see many videos on channeling and teachings, you can go to aboutoneness.com. My guest on January the 4th is Matt Kahn, a spiritual teacher and highly attuned empathetic healer. His spontaneous awakening arose out of an out-of-body experience at the age of 8 and his direct experiences with ascended masters and archangels throughout his life. As a result, he brings forth revolutionary teachings that assist energetically sensitive beings in healing the body, awakening the soul, and transforming reality throughout the power of love. Matt will be on live and he will be taking callers' questions. Be sure to call in early because the phone lines are sure to fill up. On EEN Network 2, on Saturday evenings, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 6 p.m. Pacific, the Pied Piper and Texas Rebel hosting Disclosure Now. Disclosure Now is the On the Edge of Our Seats show that covers all topics of disclosure, from the world's most famous and obscure UFO cases to cryptozoology, conspiracies, and all things that go bump in the night. Pied Piper started his journey in Michigan in 1993 as a preteen, seeing Bigfoot, and never could get enough in investigating all things paranormal. Texas Rebel is a wild Texas man who loves the same journey and has been studying these same things for years. Join them as they cover all things in the human experience that just cannot be answered by anyone. And remember, you never have to miss any show on the Enlightenment Evolution Network 1 or 2. All shows are available to listen to again immediately after they air on Blog Talk Radio on playback, or you can go to the Enlightenment Evolution Network YouTube page. All right, back to the show.
All right, thank you, Karen Newman, for the wonderful announcements. Two things before we bring back our special guest, the author of The God-Shaped Hole, Granville, Angell. Before we go back to the show, one thing, there was one announcement that had slipped through earlier this week. I believe Daniel's show was the only show it was on, possibly not, but there was an announcement saying that Daryl Anka would be a part of the channel panel, and I just wanted to let all of you know that that is not the case. He was asked, and he was not able to due to conflict in his own work schedule, so he will not be attending the channel panel part 2. Secondly, last night I had a very special experience with tomorrow evening's host for the show, Consciousness Evolution Hour, with Philip Malika. Philip Malika and Deb are two of the greatest people in the world. I was able to join them for the Consciousness Evolution Meetup group. And this is a group that manifests the physical properties of the energy that they share in Consciousness Evolution 2.0 group on Facebook, which is, I own several large groups on my Facebook account, but there's no page on Facebook that has such a personal flair, such great energy, and a great community that I've ever seen besides that and the Yael group, Yael Civilization group on Facebook. Those are the two groups that have always pulled me in time and time again. Philip Malika had his meeting, and I was the guest channeler there. So I had the opportunity to channel for between 20 and 30 people last night. I presented my own information, shared. We all had a great meeting for about an hour, hour and a half, and then I did a channeling, and it was the most wonderful energy. If any of you live in the Michigan area, feel free to connect to Philip Malika's meetup group. You can also, if you're not in that area, anywhere around the world, you can go to Facebook, Consciousness Evolution 2.0. My special thanks and love for Philip Malika and for Deb, and for bringing forward that energy of a group to allow people to co-create in the way you guys did. It was literally one of the most energetic, amazing experiences I've ever had. So if you're interested in tapping into an expansive group, look on that one on Facebook. All right, now we're going to bring back our special guest, Granville Angell. Are you there with us?
I am.
All right, beautiful. So we've talked about a lot of very deeply interesting things, as well as deeply profound things, and I'd like to bring it over to the spiritual consciousness side. You've explained your experiences with what we perceive as extraterrestrials. You've also talked a little bit about your MUFON, about what got you into the counseling work as well as the spiritual work. Now let's go through your experience at one of my favorite stories because of my own personal experience with the HemiSync is what the name of the actual program is, but the Monroe Institute started HemiSync. Can first of all you explain to people what HemiSync is, what the Monroe Institute is, and what the program you went?
Well, I won't try to go into all the technical details of HemiSync, but except to say that basically Robert Monroe was, I guess he was an acoustic engineer back in the 50s. His information is available on the website, so I won't go into a whole lot of detail, but he started experimenting with using sound waves. He realized sound affects brain waves, and certainly sound at certain frequencies delivered at different intervals between the left and the right side, between the left and the right ear. And long story short, he was experimenting with a way to enhance learning and sleep and so forth, and he was doing all this work himself, and he stumbled upon a way to have out-of-body experiences because one night he woke up and he was floating against the ceiling and he was out of his body. Robert Monroe was an engineer, a scientist first, and so he rather than just read a whole lot of literature and adopt whatever terminology most fit the theme he was into. He developed his own system, and the HemiSync is a scientifically based approach using ways of delivering sound between the left and the right ear, things like dual binaural beats and so forth. And there are different aspects and ways that they can, with these frequencies, control the brainwave pattern, which is tied into our consciousness. And I went to the Gateway Voyage, which is the basic training program they have. People from all over the world, there have been thousands, have gone to that. And I would say if you want a method that will bring you at least closer, if not right into that level of functioning where you at least have some out-of-body experience, that's the place to get the training, because they're excellent in that training. It's a wonderful, loving environment, and it's fascinating. And then they have advanced training beyond that. I mean, just amazing training. And I won't go into detail of mine, but I did have some out-of-body experience there. I had, and the way they approach it is close. We were joking, sitting at lunch with the other students, and we realized this is the real Hogwarts. There really is a Hogwarts, and this is it. The school is it. I mean, we're learning literally, and it's more than just leaving your body. It's definitely becoming aware that you're more than your physical body, that you're a spiritual being, and having a good sense of your potential, being aware of a sense of time. There was some aspects of remote viewing introduced in some of the training and everything. So, I always identified with, having evidence, and that's kind of the theme with the God-shaped hole. I believe in experience. I don't believe in believing. I mean, some people can do it that way, but, and I respect that some people can just believe stuff, but I've never been a person that can just believe. And I'm very grateful that throughout my whole life I've had all these experiences that have I've been having experience, and then I'd go try to find out, well, what the hell just happened? What was that all about? And then I would find evidence, and that's been the journey. And even meeting you, Rob, with my background and training in psychology, you can't turn that off, and I always want to wonder, well, is somebody real or not? And I know that when somebody has this kind of sensitivity and they're for real, there's a quality of character and depth of character. People who have real character don't just make this stuff up. They're real, they're genuine, they're sincere, and they're consistently so. And a few people can fake it for the long haul, but eventually it comes out. And Rob, I just want to say to you, as I've gotten to know you more and more deeply, how sincere and beautiful a soul you really are. I'm very grateful to have you in my life, and certainly in the way that you are in my life, and you're the real deal. And I felt like I wasn't going to get a chance to get that in there, so I would push it in there. This is probably a good way to share that, because
I'm very. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, it just amazes me how you're having these contacts, and I mean you're having first Treb and then Ardif, and then this thing continues to expand because It seems like, and it's very exciting listening to all the programs and the things in your channels and all, but there are really not that many of us that can do what you do, and a small number of other people amongst humanity can do, and it's a wonderful, wonderful gift for the rest of us. And
well, I want to tell you my appreciation for the kind words, because going into connecting to people, when they hear what I do, that's the very first response they get, is they're one of two ways: either skeptical because their belief systems don't allow them to take that, or they will relax into the idea because they're skeptical and open-minded, and they want to know their truth. And I appreciate all the compliments. It's very wonderful to understand that as much as I try to communicate with people, they take it for what it is. It's sincerity and love and respect and an openness, and I'm glad you have that same quality too, and that's what makes it amazing for people who experience these things. Like the Gateway experience was what helped open me up to my communication with Treb, so when I found out that you had went through that, it was just so amazing to know that was so helpful for other people too. And I'm very grateful because you have that same quality of sincerity and love, so thank you.
Thank you, Rob, but I didn't develop that to the depth you did. I mean, it would be nice to be able to leave my body with such facility that you do, and be able to have others, who can come through and share. I think probably, unless I've got a surprise down the line, I don't know that my work quite involves what yours does, but I sure do look forward to, watching you work and listening to you work. It's great.
Thank you so much. It means a lot to me.
So what am I going to do on this radio show, Rob?
Well, the next thing that I want to talk about is your spiritual journey in whole. And usually I bring this up front, but with your resume of things that you've done in your life, it's so extensive we had to cover that before we got to the spiritual journey. Now, you talked about how you were 19, 20 in the military, in that war place, and you had already integrated meditation. So the first thing I'm going to ask you about is what guided you to meditate in the first place, and then secondly, maybe if you could skim over some of your spiritual journey overall. I know that you've studied under quite a few very renowned gurus, that you've also done lots of Reiki healing and a lot of wonderful yoga, and I've also, yes, Kriya Yoga. There's all of these wonderful things that you've done. Can you give us a walkthrough, starting from the beginning of what interested you in meditation, how you found that, and then to where you're at the present day?
Sure. Well, interestingly, what I was going into with the war, flying an unarmed helicopter ambulance, involves very high casualties among the personnel that do that kind of work. So my first exposure was reading books and learning how to do self-hypnosis so I could control myself, if I were shot in a mission, being able to control and fly even with the pain and all that. Fortunately, I never actually got shot. So, but, and then one thing led to another. I had started reading about contactee books and experimenting with meditation because of things I was reading. And then when I met my wife, Kalina's mother, Alice, we both were very deeply into, that was our attraction. Most of our attraction for each other was our spiritual journey, and we got into a spiritual community, and a lot of the folks there were practicing Kriya Yoga. They were studying, teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda, and we followed that. Kriya has been a major focus in my life because it works. It works for me, and it opens up centers, raises consciousness, and it reminds us that that this is real, that this flow of energy and this fact that we are spiritual beings is an absolute reality. The flow of love through the heart center, all these things are very, very real. And they're available for all of us to experience. And, I've had kind of a hard life in terms of my career, making a living, and even with the education I had, I won't go into a whole lot of detail. Part of it's living out in the woods and trying to do conventional counseling in an area that was not open to that so much early on. It's much more so now. Excuse me. But a lot of my interest has been playing my small part in trying to help us be more aware that the world is going through a transition, we're going through a transition, that we are increasingly realizing that, what I've been sharing all along, that we're spiritual beings. And I wrote The God-Shaped Hole because I was aware that one of the big gaps in psychology, as taught and shared and generally in conventional Western circles, is that humans have this emptiness in us, this natural longing, which I often like to call a holy longing. It just seems like no matter what we get or what we do, whatever happens in our life, there's just got to be more. And our culture keeps telling us, well, just buy more. Just get more power. Get more, be more, just do more. It's always outer focused. When the fact is, what we're doing is we're looking out in the world and we're seeing all these things that may be exciting and all that, but not knowing who we really are, which are these very powerful spiritual beings, leaves us feeling empty. And so I realized that all of us have a phase in our life that continues all our lives, for most of us, which is a phase where we have this longing to ask these ultimate questions. Who am I? Why am I here? What's life all about? What's my purpose in life? I'm going to die. What is that all about? Is there anything beyond that? What is it all about anyway? These are all ultimate questions. And we have these questions, and we have to answer these questions before. How we answer these questions determines how we live our whole lives. Okay, and some of us just answer them by ignoring them and going on. We put all of our energy into becoming a great doctor or a lawyer or attaining a certain amount of power or, winning JV or varsity in football, whatever age we are, whatever we're trying to accomplish. And no matter what we accomplish, it doesn't feel like it's enough. Like that old song, it used to bother me, and then I realized it was incredibly profound. I'm not going to sing for you now, but I think the title is that all there is? Is that all there is? Kind of thing. And that's the refrain. And then I realized what an incredibly powerful song, because that's how most of us feel. We get that PhD, and it's like, is that all there is? I just still feel like me. We become the general, and it's like, well, is that all there is? I still feel like me. We get the car, we get the house, we get whatever. Some of us don't get anything, and, and we feel like, well, I don't need it. Maybe we were actually richer because of our spiritual riches and our connection with nature, which I haven't even touched on, how we abuse and damage this planet out of our ignorance without realizing that this is the mother we live on and the source of our energy and that and our connectedness on a physical level that nurtures us, with every breath. And, that is part of the whole picture too. But this emptiness has to be filled. And if we don't fill it, well, I guess to throw out some teasers, and it's touched on in the God-Shaped Hole, first in an introduction and then in a story, an allegory with a little boy in his interchange, his discussion with his wise grandmother about all of this. But, we have to answer these questions. And I've come to this realization, or we just sort of blunder through life, and then something happens, because suffering is part of life. We lose somebody, we lose a job maybe, somebody dies, something happens, and then we ask the reactive ultimate questions. Those are the ones that come if we haven't answered the primal ones. And it's like, why does this happen to me? Why? Or we win the lottery, and how do I deserve this? Or become a great comedian, and we think we're not good enough to really be that and have that, because the shame comes in, because we haven't realized who we really are. And, the whole idea is all of us need to try to get in touch with how we've answered our ultimate questions. And if we haven't answered them to our satisfaction, then it's important for us to have the courage to charge in there and try to get these answers. You know, in our culture, for the most part, we get the answers as a package before we even ask the questions. A lot of us are born in a family that has a religion, and they say, this is how we believe, this is how it is. And, oh, by the way, believe it or you go to hell. You know, and so it's like you don't even dare challenge because you've this small child and you're being told you're going to go to hell. What is that? Burn in eternity or whatever. You know, different religions have different ways of presenting it. But fear is not a way of getting answers to our ultimate questions. And trying to force ourselves to believe, you know, I think we will find answers to our questions if we just keep looking, make life part of life, a major part of our lives, this great adventure, this search for finding answers, because once we open up to this search to try to find answers, our whole world will change around us. We'll find synchronicities happening, you know, meaningful coincidences. If for folks that aren't familiar with synchronicities, I'm sure you and Kalina and so many of the other folks have addressed this in considerable detail. Things happen in our life, signs. We will get answers. We will get experiential answers in exact proportion to the degree we open ourselves up to the possibility that what we live in as a universe and who we are is far beyond our imaginations. And so my challenge would be just be willing to consider that as a possibility, and don't just buy into any belief system. You know, just listen to listen to somebody's channel and see how that sounds and compare it to something else. Read some literature, watch Ancient Aliens, go to church, go to synagogue, go to, you know, the Hindu temple, and you learn some yoga. Do whatever your inner spirit takes you to do. And in time, you'll have these answers. I am sure of it. And in that, in family, and taking care of our planet, and living this simple, beautiful life in connection with nature, I mean, these are the things that I think a lot of the powers that be on this planet have just kept us distracted and in debt and struggling and living on a material level and not really knowing who we are or what our birthright and our destiny is and what's meant to be. And it's time for us all individually to break out of this, watch Enlightenment Evolution Network and all these other programs and things, and take advantage of everything that's opening up and challenging us to be a part of this new great awakening of humanity.
Well, and that in itself is your motivation to go. You're going to be starting a new show on this network called Soul Mentors, and from what we've talked about, that's your inspiration to bring people to the forefront of their own journey and finding that God within themselves, to find a God in any form that they can accept that increases their own heart's desire, that whole, that God-shaped whole, which is a beautiful title for the book. First of all, Soul Mentors, why is that the name of your show? Okay, well, I started a website, I guess it's several years ago, called soulmentors.com. And my intention is to continue it, although the site itself was very formative and was out of date. I went to a minor UFO conference. I was a speaker at that and was in a really bad car accident on the way home. And the car was destroyed, and I had just minor injuries. And but that and some other things, some physical illness, I think part of this is all part of my life challenge, have kind of gotten in the way. And during that time I retired, but my focus, you know, I let my credentials go, which allows me more freedom. Believe it or not, when you have professional credentials in some fields, you're limited in what you can do unless, you know, I'm not going to get all the details, but this allows me to focus more on spiritual aspects
And in the radio show, my hope is to encourage people to call in and feel free to share their struggle, their challenge, their journey, their walk to finding out deeper things in life that really matter, to filling this God-shaped hole, this emptiness. What is it that will fill the empty? How do we live the questions? There's an aspect in the book where, Joey asks his grandmother about, asks him, demands her, answer the questions. Who am I? What's this all about? You're going to die. Am I going to? What's that all about? And she says the important thing is that you live the questions. And so the way I see the show unfolding, although I'm not in charge, ultimately, so we'll see how it goes, but is to invite people to call in and share. And, how are we living these questions together to get these answers? And see, just watch how it unfolds. And I think all these, I'm so excited watching all these radio programs everybody's doing, you and Kalina and all these other folks, and I'm going, well, now what can I possibly contribute to all that? It seems like they got all the bases covered. So, but obviously there are folks above us, they're kind of have an oversight that are helping all this stuff to unfold, and they have a bigger picture, and I'm just trying to respond to whatever that bigger picture might be and see how this comes about. I do know that in training in the mental health field and the counseling field and so forth, generally there is not an acceptance or awareness of a soul or a higher aspect of oneself. There is some of that among a number of practitioners. And so my particular focus, based on over 30 years of working with people, is to help draw out this awareness and address and communicate ourselves, between ourselves at the soul level. There's just as an example, there's work being done by a gentleman by the name of Robert Schwartz, who wrote a book called Your Soul's Plan. And then he subsequently wrote a book called Your Soul's Gift. And he talks about, how we actually plan our lives before we come into this incarnation and what we hope to experience and learn and so forth from this walk. And, and I think having a show where there's a forum where we can all share together how we're going through these experiences and what it means for us, and try to address questions that we're actually living, and try to come to a level where we're actually having experiences that will give us answers to these questions, so that we don't have to live on the basis of belief. We'll have something stronger than belief. Religion tends to equate faith and belief, and I don't do that. I think a lot of us don't do that. As we become more spiritually aware, we realize that faith is much deeper than just believing, and not to criticize, that aspect of the path, but it's deeper than that. And I've found in my work over the years that just believing is really not holding us together when we go through some terrible crisis, like somebody dies or we have a very serious illness or whatever. It just doesn't hold together because it's just based on belief. Somebody told me they're an authority, I buy into it, and oh my gosh, my life falls apart, and suddenly I don't know where I stand because it's just not strong enough. But if I know that I'm beyond, my body is a vehicle, and I'm so much more than that, and we all are. And, we have guides and angels and beings that are overseeing us and taking care of us and helping us grow, that the universe really does operate on a principle of grace. It's very giving, and, and when we start to have these deeper levels of awareness, we don't have the fear that we used to have. I should stop at this point because I feel like I'm rambling. But
oh no, everything you're saying is hitting the mark, and it's something that we look at as a spiritual society, a spiritual group that we are now ingrained in, and all of these things are very important to cover. Now, I want to take callers. I want to remind anyone who wants to call in, area code 347-308-8788. We have a lot of callers on the line, but you have to hit 1 to let us know that you want to get on the phone and talk, and you're not just listening from your phone. So please, if you haven't dialed 1 on your keypad and you want to talk to Granville Angell, then please hit 1. Before we start taking callers, I need to know, for you to let everyone else know if they're interested in going to your website, how to get there. If they're interested in buying a copy of your book, how's that work out? Or if they want to look into anything that you've done or are going to be doing, how to make that available, or is that something yet to come for you?
Well, I'm glad you asked that, Rob. At this point, you're probably the major source, you and Kalina. You know, I'm hoping to. I had it on Amazon for a long time, but that's a long story. I think Barnes & Noble can get it. Some folks thought it was out of print, but it's not. I've still got, I don't know, 1,400 copies left or something like that. And once I get soulmentors.com revamped with your help, your expertise, I expect that it's going to be offered through there. And of course, it can be ordered through, what's the name of the company, the distributors. I'm having a senior moment here. But there is a distributor, so, if they just contact you, they want a copy. I'm the world's worst businessman. I sometimes make business cards, and even when I do, I forget to carry them. I can remember back toward the end of my career, I had 2 clocks in my office, one where I was facing and one where the client was facing, and she looked at each clock and said, "Boy, some counselor you are. You got 2 clocks in your office and neither one of them works." I said, well, time is not the most important thing, If I know somebody's waiting, then we stop the session. Otherwise, it's just, I guess I'm making excuses for my shortcomings. But if they contact you all, I'll make sure they can get a book.
Okay.
And at some point, we'll put something together to make a formal distribution process. I have to reestablish that.
All right. So for those of you who might be interested in buying a copy of the book, contact Kalina Angell at Treb Channeling. That's T as in Tom, R as in Rob, E as in Elephant, B as in Boy, Treb, and then the word channeling with 2 N's for Nancy. So trebchanneling.Kalina, that's Kalina, Kalina at gmail.com, or go to Treb Channeling under the Contact Us, trebchanneling.com, contact, and just send an email to either one of us letting us know that you'd like a copy of that book, and we can get that to happen. And Soul Mentors is going to be your domain after the website's revamped, I imagine?
Yeah, it is my domain already. There's some wrong things on it. It gives my credentials as they previously existed before I formally retired them about a year ago. I've got, my main site was transitions-counseling.com, and there's a little sign up there at the very first, the opening page, the home page, that to that effect that I've retired. I haven't done that because I intend to revamp, and kind of build myself as doing spiritual mentorship with folks, and I expect that's going to be up sometime over the next few months. But meanwhile, you can go to that site and read a lot about the philosophy and the focus that I want to take Soul Mentors in, the direction that we're going to take it, and that basically would like to create a network of folks that we're all helping each other, and nobody's in any particular level of authority. It's just a matter of helping us gain experience and learn from each other. And a lot of this is already happening, this kind of thing that you're doing and Kalina and others are doing. And, I'd like to see it expand a little more and develop a way of having meetings across the country using some of the methods that we're going to put together to help people have real experiences that support and, that support a deeper reality. And then whatever your religion is or whatever practice is, that's fine. We're not trying to discourage that. It's just a matter of finding a deeper faith and reinforcing your faith through real experience.
Yeah, and that's I think is the most important idea in sharing. We've only got about 15 minutes left before we call tonight. So what we're going to do, we're going to take our first caller at area code 206. Who do we have with us this evening?
Hi, Rob. This is Risha calling.
Hi, Risha. How are you?
Well, I am just fine, and I'm sitting here really enjoying hearing Granville. I missed the first 15 minutes, so I may have missed some of the of your background, Granville, but I find it very interesting. And a man who has a career and is not interested in time, that's the person I want to talk to.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. It's not so much lack of interest as I've never been very good at dealing with time. It's just I don't know, somehow not as relevant as it is to other folks on this planet.
Quite seriously, I see the new paradigm, the new world that we're coming into as we make this ascension process, where time, being such a limiting factor, is not going to be a big deal as it has.
I believe that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. In fact, we were talking about a little earlier about the Monroe Institute experience, the Gateway Voyage, and there's an exercise there where you go to a focus level where they call it no time, and we often experience this ourselves spontaneously when sometimes you go to sleep and then it seems like 5 minutes later the alarm clock is going, and you wonder what happened. I just shut my eyes and it's morning already. Well, you experience this consciously in this exercise at the Monroe Institute where you're literally aware that you're there, and you go into the process and then you come back right out of it, and it's like, how did a half hour or 45 minutes go by when it and you're there the whole time. It's not like you're sleeping in unconscious.
So you've moved interdimensionally out of the third dimensional constrictions.
Yeah.
Wow. I love it.
And we live outside that all the time anyway, don't we? I mean, it's only because we're focused and addicted to our physical bodies and our physical world that we have this sense of time, and we become attached to this sense of time and needing it to be a certain way. When we let that go, which is one of the benefits of meditation and certain other spiritual practices, we suddenly realize time is forever and time is in a slight little instant and all in one.
Yes, I can tie into that to some degree, and I was a nurse in a trauma unit, and my last year or so of nursing, can you believe I did not wear a watch?
Wow.
Which is really amazing, And I have to say there was a lot of trust that if I ever, in a cardiac arrest and type of thing, there was always something on the wall to give me the times that I needed to write down. But I actually consciously went to work without that little wristwatch on my wrist.
Didn't you feel freer? You feel like less safe?
I actually kind of felt like I was walking on the edge quite a bit in a trauma unit to do that. Yeah. But now that I look back on it, yes, a huge freedom. And then for the last 3 years, my husband and I lived right on the very edge of the ocean, right on, practically on the water in Washington State here. And we got in tune with another kind of time. We really got in tune with the sun, the moon, not so much the moon, but the sun and the tides.
Yeah.
And it was just a whole shift from head to heart, I think, or into body.
It ties you in with nature, too. And I think that's part of the reason we, as a culture, abuse nature so much, because we've lost our connection with those changes in nature, those cycles that our ancestors, was such an integral part of our ancestors' existence.
Right. When they didn't have so much in their mind to keep them busy and distracted, as often people do here.
Yeah. All the distraction keeps us from finding out who we really are, doesn't it?
It's a good ploy, and keep those fears that are down deep. It keeps them down underneath when we're so busy. Too busy to go down and look at the fears and the beliefs that keep us constricted too. I see that. Yeah.
So how is your life now that you're not formally practicing nursing?
Oh, it's so awesome. And with the young kids, I'm 70 years old, so I've got a lot behind me, including a stint in Vietnam as a there. And so
were you a nurse there?
Yes, I was.
Well, we may have crossed paths.
Well, I missed that part. Were you in Vietnam also?
Yeah, I was the dust-off pilot.
Oh my goodness! I was at the 95th evac in Da Nang and also in Saigon.
Oh, okay.
I was killed there too.
I was in the Central Highlands, so I was going to, Pleiku, Quin Yon were most of the places. 91st evac and that area in the Central Highlands in 68 and 9.
I was there in 68 and 9 also. Welcome home, Granville.
Thank you.
Home.
Welcome to you too, sister. I'm a few years behind you.
Welcome. Yes.
I don't feel my age either too much.
Well, you know what's happened? I'm actually getting younger. I really am. And I heard somebody say, talking about time, might have been Bashar, I can't remember, but someone said that if you're doing something that you're really loving and you're in that space where you don't know time, literally time doesn't exist for you then, and you haven't aged.
Absolutely. I believe that. I mean, I feel like I look more my age now, but, in the last couple of years I've fought off CML, leukemia, and about the time I realized I was fully in remission from that, I was diagnosed with prostate cancer and just finished radiation therapy at the end of I guess it was fall. So, and, other people are saying, you're supposed to be a lot sicker than you are, how are you doing this stuff? And it's like, well, these are bumps in the road.
Exactly.
That's my expectation. They're bumps in the road, and they're great. I remember being diagnosed and thinking, wow, this is supposed to be really scary, but this is an interesting thing, I mean, I wonder if I'm going to survive this one, And it's not that there wasn't any fear, but I found myself thinking, what is it like when it feels really, really real for folks that realize, that actually are not aware that their body is a vehicle and that they continue, that there is no death. The physical body, it just drops away and you continue on. And, of course, we saw so much of that in Vietnam, and it was such a horror story. But, surviving that and then surviving this gives some really interesting perspectives. And I'm just kind of getting whatever karmic life, soul, plan, whatever stuff it all is all about out of the way. So, I want to be around to write and help usher in this new era that however my contribution is going to be, my little part might only be just witnessing most of it, but
yes,
it's going to be a great adventure.
Yes, and that actually is enough to witness, to experience, to live what you're living. That is enough. We don't really have to do, unless it's our heart telling us this is what we want to do more than anything else. I don't
agree.
Do it. What was I just another talk about senior moments? I just had one here. You said something back earlier that really, it's gone. Anyway, that's okay. It'll come back.
We could just sit here and have senior moments together.
I'm loving my senior moments too. I know what it is. It was the compassion. The compassion that both of us can bring because of what we've seen and what we've gone through. I had really, really severe PTSD, and so much so that I stayed down in the basement of my house almost for 3 years. Didn't leave, really severe stuff coming back on me. But now I see what a healing that was, not just for this lifetime, but for many lifetimes, and the compassion that has brought me in these last few years for our brothers and sisters who are not where I'm at, or where we're at.
Yeah. I can relate.
Just anchoring the compassion has been a big thing. And just the other thing I wanted to say is to Rob, Happy New Year to you and Kalina at Granville and your.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Happy New Year to you and Stanley. Thank you. Something I want to add, because I know both of you personally. I've seen your faces, whether it be on picture or in real life. Both of you do not look anywhere close to your age, and I know that Granville said he does, but from an external perspective, he does not look his age. He looks at least 10 years younger, at least.
From the baby boomer generation.
Well, thank you, Rob.
Well, thank you guys for bringing this conversation. Oh, thank you, Risha, too, for calling us up and joining in on our conversation. It was very, very wonderful.
Yeah, thank you. I really enjoyed it. If you're a portent of the kind of folks that are going to call in, that's very exciting for me. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Awesome. I did too.
Yeah.
Namaste. Oh. All right. Thanks, Risha, for calling in. We're going to take one more caller, 352. This is Sister Savita, and Sister Savita's with us. We've only got about 5 minutes left for this call, Savita, so anything that you'd like to talk to Granville about, please feel free.
Hey.
Hi, how are you?
Good. I just kind of I came back from work, so I've seen the clock. It's 11 o'clock, and I got to talk to you. You are Kalina's dad, right?
I am. My body is. Kalina's an old friend from forever, I think. But technically yes.
That's why I had to call you. I had to call because I want to say hello to you.
Well, hello.
And I know I'm going to meet you.
Well, I look forward to that.
It is. I'm so excited to talk to you.
Well, I'm honored to speak to you.
And Kalina is so wonderful. She's so beautiful.
Oh, she is. I have two beautiful daughters, and it's pure. I mean, we couldn't be more proud of both of them. What they became is just amazing, amazing people. And I mean, that's part of the great joy of my life right now is who our daughters became.
I can understand. For a parent, when your children turn out so beautiful from inside and out, it just we did do something good in the life, right?
Oh, I think so. I don't take full credit, though. I mean, these were deep, powerful souls. My wife and I realized the challenges we had when they came through, and it was just a very interesting, beautiful ride. Just trying to stay out of the way and provide the guidance and nurturing to let them unfold and be who they were meant to become. That's all I need.
Kids, I'm learning myself. It's sometimes it seems like challenge for us, but it's such a great learning. You know, they make you to go inside yourself, and it just, you know, I think when we raise them, I think we are raising ourselves too.
Pardon?
I'm saying when we raise our kids, we are raising ourselves too.
Oh, absolutely. I think I'm a much better grandfather than I was a dad.
That's what I think, you know. I'm just
yeah.
I have 19-year-old daughter who has no plans of getting married, but I know I want to fast forward my life 15 more years, you know, in future, so I can become a grandmother.
She'll sort it out, you know. I mean, a lot of times you think of where you're at, and then when you bring through a soul that is going to have at least the problems you had and maybe more, because the world is even crazier in some ways. You know, we're going through all this transition, and, you know, they're trying to find a grounding, and the economic resources and all that are not there anymore until we get through these positive changes. And so it is hard for them to reach maturity and land on their feet. It definitely is a challenge. And it's amazing to watch how well they... Pardon?
I'm saying challenges are good.
Oh, yes.
They're
That's
good.
how we grow.
Yes, they're good. But this is so amazing, you know, like, you have been past life regressionist, right?
I have what?
You did past life regressions. Did you?
Oh, yes, I did past life regression work as part of my... Yes, sure did. And I intend to continue to do some of that because... well, you know, I just enjoy doing it. It's not part of the formal protocol that most counselors do, and I'm going to be a soul mentor now, and I'll be free to do a lot of things that are avant-garde and cutting edge with my remaining years.
Wow. That's exciting.
It is.
That's exciting. And plus, more exciting, you know, when Treb tells us, you know, like, I've never seen Rob, I've never seen Kalina, but, you know, what I feel for them, it is so amazing, you know. There are no words that I can explain. I feel so connected. And when Treb tells us that we were together in different lives, it just kind of mind-blowing, you know. It looks like, you know, they say the world is small, I say universe is small.
Sure. Well, you're sharing the energy, and it's familiar energy, and that's very real to you, and that's even more important than the visual experience, because our visual spectrum is only one small portion of the energy, you know?
Yep.
Yeah.
I hate to... Oh, I'm sorry, sister, to interrupt. We've got about 2 minutes left. I wanted to let you know if you're wanting to meet Granville in real life, he will be with us in our North Carolina trip in Asheville. Yes, he'll be there with us.
Yeah.
I hate to do it, sister. I love you very much, but I've got to cut the call short. We've only got 2 more minutes before we got to jump off air. I love you very much, and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you. Enjoyed talking.
Oh, love you, sister. Thank you. All right. Oh, love you too. And everybody who has called in tonight, who has listened tonight, I want to send my own gratitude and love, and most definitely send my love and appreciation for you, Granville. You've been an amazing guest, amazing information. Everyone who's listened tonight, I'm sure, is going to be looking forward to the show, which should be within hopefully the next 2 or 3 weeks, but for sure within the next month we'll have it started and ready. Is there anything you'd like to take us out in the last minute with?
I was just curious. I sensed Kalina really wanting to share in the last part of our conversation, and I was wishing she had a mic because I knew I felt like she wanted to share something, but of course, you know, she didn't have the mic.
I have a Rob.
What'd she say?
She said, I don't need a mic when I've got a Rob.
There you go. Okay.
Yes, she was inputting on your and Savita's talk, and she was doing that off mic, but she's definitely, it's amazing your guys' connection and link, you know, to feel that energy through that. Same. If you want to share something, Kalina, we got 1 minute left. Go ahead.
Well, in this last minute, I guess I just want to say Happy New Year, although I'm sure we'll be calling each other soon before the year is up and we have the new one.
Absolutely. I'm going to wish you a Happy New Year, too.
You too. I love you.
I love you. I love you both.
I love you, too, and thank you so much, Granville, for joining us. If you want to check out Granville's work, soulmentors.com, also transition/counseling, correct?
So, transitions-counseling.com. There are a lot of articles and things on there, yeah.
Okay, beautiful. You can go there. If you'd like to read the book, The God-Shaped Hole, you can contact us at Treb Channeling under the Contact Us. I'd like to say Happy New Year to all of the listeners out there, and we love you very much.
Love you.